What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 765. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how's your week going?
Oh, it's going great. Playing in some of these Cube 64s.
Have you been winning, or?
No, not so far. The last one I played was a tough one. Lost at 2-0, and was a heartbreaker.
Are these the ones that are qualifying for the live cube thing, or are these just the 64 mans that they've been running before?
No, they only run these ones now that qualify for the live cube thing, which means you need to 4-0 a league to get an entry, and then if you 6-0, you get to draft, and if you 3-0 that draft, you get to go to Cube World. So, I mean, there's a path forward here, but that is very difficult. Yes.
All right, well, keep at it, and maybe you'll qualify. That would be pretty cool. I honestly kind of can't wait to see how that thing unfolds when it does. And by the way, that thing is brought to you by Ultimate Guard, which this show is also at least somewhat brought to you by Ultimate Guard. They're the place to go basically for the best stuff in the business when it comes to protecting your cards, protecting your decks, protecting your collection. We all need that stuff. You can't just have piles of cards sitting around everywhere, as much as Luis would lead you to believe that that's okay to do. You do need to, keep things organized, keep things protected. And, that's also a good opportunity to express yourself a little bit of style, a little bit about what you think is cool, what colors you like, all that kind of stuff. And Ultimate Guard has you covered. If you check out ultimateguard.com, you can see their full product lineup, and you can buy their stuff at your favorite local game store or your favorite online retailer. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. Also, thank you to each and every one of our patrons over on Patreon. It's where you can sign up to support us directly. It's patreon.com/limited resources. If you sign up, you get a thank you card and a sticker in the mail, no matter what level you sign up for. Thanks to everybody who supports us there. Now, one of the cool things that you get for being a patron is you get access to our Patreon feed. And that's like where we put up our posts that only go to the patrons. Now, one of the benefits is our Q&A shows, which is exactly what we're doing this time on LR. We're going to be doing, I love these shows. These are the ones where we get to have a little fun. We get to do a little off topic. Most of the stuff's about Magic, but some of it's not. And these are questions from our most dedicated listeners on our Patreon. Every person who is a Patreon supporter of ours gets access to this, and you can put up a question. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get through as many of them as we can here on this episode of the show. We're not going to do a crack a pack, and we're not going to do the Patreon question of the week, obviously. We're just going to jump right in. So our first question comes from, Luis, did you want to mention the Arena Open before we do that?
Yeah, there is another Arena Open for Bloomburrow this weekend, which is awesome. It's a fun format. I love Arena Opens, always have, and pretty much always will. So if you are interested in Bloomburrow and battling, this weekend's a great one. I will say on the one hand, there's an Arena Open if you just log on and it shows up in the client. That's probably how I would assume a vast majority of people figure it out. Mm-hmm. They haven't done a very good job of advertising them otherwise. It is not easy to find. So that's why I kind of like giving folks a heads up that this is happening. I
mean, I had no idea until you told me. And then even then we were looking on the event calendar and it didn't seem to be on where we were looking. But then you found a link that you had sent to you, and it was like, okay, I guess this is real. So apparently we do get to do Arena Open this weekend. I knew there was something that we wanted to mention before we got into the questions. I'll put a link in the show notes to the information on the Arena Open as well. Okay, our first question comes from Tabletop Tycoon, who says, if you could plan your dream limited weekend tournament, what would it be? Which draft formats, prizes, number of players, etc.? Can I get a high stakes, Luis? Can I get a high stakes limited weekend out of you here, or what?
My dream limited weekend would be team cube draft for like $1,000 a head per draft, which is stakes I have done actually.
I was going to say, you have any experience with that, by chance? Would you have it be where like you showed up with your team?
Totally.
Dude, this is awesome.
You got to show up with your squad. I mean, the squad I used for let's just say high investment drafting I really cared about winning was always like me and Mac and ideally like Troll or BK, and we would just jam. And part of what was so cool about it is I knew so much what my teammates were thinking, where I can look at a pack, I know what I'm going to take, I can predict probably what the opponent is going to take, but I can also predict with a pretty high degree of certainty what Mac's going to take, what, Troll or BK is going to take. And we actually got into a meta game where Mac was known to draft mono white a lot, right? In Cube, very good deck and somewhat underdrafted, to the point where the teammates or the opponents would know that he liked it, which then meant if I was passing to someone who was passing to Mac, I could cut mono white. They would be trying to cut Mac on mono white, and he's good enough at draft that he would be able to avoid that trap a lot of the time. So much, or you'd be passing to someone who likes combo, and you do something like ship them a combo piece and then cut that exact combo, and they just took it. Kind of like Martel got me the other day with Luris. He passed me a Luris, then cut all the good cards that went with Luris, it was so painful because Martel's so satisfied with himself. You just know exactly what he was like. And it was just like, oh my God.
Yeah. He was actually streaming the other day and I was watching him stream. It was fun to see him. He's Martel's great. I love watching his stream. He doesn't stream very often, but when he does, it's really good.
He's not streaming right now. He's at Burning Man.
Oh, that's right. He was actually talking about that, and he had like a guinea pig, and like he's got a lot going on right now.
Oh
yeah. I love this idea. What about structure wise? Like, is there a way to do like pod play, like where there's a little bit of forgiveness as far as not winning every single round you play forever or whatever?
That's team draft. Like, sure, you can go 0-3 and win the draft. I mean, that I think is.
So you think also, that? Go ahead.
Well, there's a couple different ways to schedule to do these things. One, you can do like the grand prize thing where it's like you do a bunch of drafts and eventually two teams have the best record. Maybe they even have like, like you said, you don't need to go XO. You could go like 4-1 to make top 2 or something like that. And then you play for like the whole kit and caboodle. Or the like, we just get together for a weekend, do a bunch of 3-on-3s and 4-on-4s, and just each draft, you're just playing for prizes,
Yeah, that would be cool too. But man, I want a champion.
I wasn't here for, I wasn't able to go to this one, but a lot of the guys who play poker and Magic in Vegas had this like tournament draft weekend where it was all 3-on-3 teams, a bunch of old formats, very high stakes, and like, that kind of stuff is awesome too, because I wouldn't want to play a high stakes draft against like random Magic players, because I wouldn't feel good about, what would happen if I wouldn't want to lose, but I also wouldn't feel like the best about winning. Playing with poker players is the best because like they know they're disadvantaged. They know that it's totally fine. Like this is for fun for them. This is just not a stressful thing. And it's kind of like if you were to go to a casino and you see the whale there just dumping money, right?
Totally.
Like, the casino's not very worried about their outlook.
Totally. I remember one of the years, there was a decent stretch of time where I would go to the World Series of Poker every year. And one of the years when I was there, I was actually just playing at the table. I was playing in a cash game, and I got a text from Dave Williams, and he was like, "Hey, are you like around?" And I was like, "Yeah."
He's number one on that list of Magic/poker players who love drafting and love
totally.
high stakes.
And he was putting together a draft at his place. He was like, "Hey, we need somebody for a draft. You should get over here." And I'm like, "All right." And so I zipped over there, and it was team draft. It was high stakes. It was exactly what you said, and it was awesome. It was super fun, and it was with mostly poker players, some Magic/poker players. I did get to play against, is his name Sigmund? I think he won a PT like way back in the day, and then he transitioned to poker. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Anyway, but it was cool because he got to tell me a bunch of stories about old school PT stuff. It was during that range. Anyway, I agree. I would attend your draft weekend. Who's your squad?
One of my fondest memories, actually, this is long enough ago that the statute of limitations has long since run out. On the way to Grand Prix Sydney in 2010, me and David Ochoa booked our flight to go from Northern California to LA with a 24-hour layover in LA, then to Sydney, and all we did that whole day was we just drafted at the house of Magic/poker player named Devin and his buddies. And I got second in that Grand Prix and won a lot more money playing those money drafts. Like,
totally.
It was just, but the reason I really enjoyed it is it wasn't this sort of thing where like everyone is like super mad when they lose or like it's really devastating or anything like that. It was a bunch of guys who wanted to play against, the best Magic players they could find in stakes that they cared about, but didn't mean that much to them, win or lose. And they knew they were 40% or whatever, not, and we had the advantage. And that's what got us to do it. Because obviously, this is also 15 years ago. I didn't have a whole lot of money at this point. So it was really meaningful to me how much I was winning there. And I wouldn't have just gambled against these guys in a 50-50, right? Like there's no way I could do that.
Right.
But I don't know. We all had a great time. Those guys had a good time. That lucky coin, that I always flipped, the one with the buffalo.
The one that I've never beaten ever at anything.
Devin gave me it on the way out as just like a memento. He's like, yeah, this was fun. Like, here, take a lucky coin or whatever. He had a big stack of these.
Man, I really liked Devin until that moment. Like, I don't know him, but like once you said that he's the one that gave you I call it your cursed coin. I've lost that thing so many times. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Tabletop Tycoon, thanks for the question. Next comes from Mac, who says, which famous duo do you think you two most closely resemble? He says, I'm going with Kemp and Payton. That's Sean Kemp and Gary Payton.
Sean Kemp and Gary Payton.
Yeah, I like that one. Those are two legendary Seattle Supersonics players.
Well, I've got some. I mean, you could clearly go with Stockton Malone.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know which one of us is setting the other up with assists.
Oh, come on! I'm Stockton. I'm dropping dimes. You're dunking it. Yeah.
Oh, also, yeah. In the booth, that's definitely right. The play-by-play is setting up the color commentator. Mm-hmm. You could go like Jordan Pippen, though. Honestly, like Jordan Rodman would be even better. Like, not as much of a duo, but they played together.
They did. Yeah,
and I'm much more of a Rodman than anything else. But at the end of the day, I've got to go LeBron J.R. Smith. So that'll be the duo.
I'm really hoping that you're J.R. Smith here.
Oh, I'm definitely J.R. Smith in this example.
What about Timon and Pumbaa?
Timon and Pumbaa is also a pretty good one.
Next question comes from John, who says, hi, Marcel and Luis. Thanks for making an awesome show. I look forward to every episode. I especially enjoy the nice balance of the intuition and experience of great Magic players mixed with what we can learn from the data of limited Magic. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. That is what we're aiming for. For my question, if hypothetically tomorrow there wasn't going to be any more limited Magic data available going forward, what would be the things you've learned from data that changed your perspective of Magic? Anything that you didn't know or anything that was reinforced? Wow, that's a great question.
Yeah, that is actually a really good question.
Post-apocalyptic.
This is a world I could actually really easily imagine. What if Wizards, for some reason, decided they really didn't like what 17 Lands was doing?
Yeah.
And they just changed it such that the API for Magic Arena was not giving you data anymore. I don't know how easy or hard or feasible that would be, but I have to imagine that is in the realm of things that could occur, right?
Definitely it's happened in other games, yeah.
Yeah. And if that were the case, what would we take from that? I guess I would take from that trinkety value cards like Cash Grab or anything that like puts two things into play, Malevolent Rumble, like those two cards have just been obscenely good. Mm-hmm. 1-mana combat tricks have been, I think, historically better than I had historically thought. Mm-hmm. And I guess those are like two of the bigger things for me. Like those are the two classes of cards, which I think typically have been not rated as highly as they should be.
Yeah. I would say a couple of things that were reinforced. One, using up all your mana. We knew that we've been talking about that for years on the podcast, but when we had Circovitz on and he explained the win rate percentages based on used mana going all the way down, at least in the current era, down to 1 drops, right? Those were eye-opening numbers for sure. It's very hard to get that big of a win percent bump later in the game, outside of a huge bomb or something like that. So that really hammered home that we were on the right path with that. That stood out. Also, we have seen this pattern enough now that what everybody has been saying is true, which is the draft is self-correcting, and it does self-correct. We have seen formats numerous times now that we thought were way out of whack in the first week or so, and we're worried that they would stay that way. And while those initial indicators did carry through to the end of the format as far as what was good and stuff. Other things do tend to fill those gaps, and it's quite difficult for, a very narrow range of archetypes to really truly run away with a format and never give it back. So, I would say, if it's early in the format and you're really going, oh my God, did they screw this up really bad? I would say hang in there. There's going to be a few things that will bubble up as well.
Bloomburrow is that format already.
Yes.
Like look at Bloomburrow, and I have been drafting it continuously, and I have noticed, even just without looking at any sort of data or whatever, like blue is way more open and viable than it was initially, because initially there was no reason to draft blue, because you could get a good green white or green black deck, red black, whatever, almost every time. People just weren't valuing the cards correctly, that whatever. Like now, I don't like to draft. I don't end up going into green white that often because I find it gets pretty cut, and I end up in a spot where, like, yeah, you can totally draft blue, and it's very viable and good. And I don't think we would not have guessed that in the first week.
Totally. Yeah, great question from John there. I love that question. We might have to
also,
ask.
I hope Circovitz doesn't hear this, but if I could flip a switch and have data not exist, 17 lands not exist, I would. So,
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, this is, the problem that Standard faces now as well, with Arena especially. It's like these things getting solved quickly. I would also
cut all online deck lists, or at least greatly limit them. I just think it's more fun when you don't do that stuff. I'm not saying we should live in this world or are going to, but I'm just telling you what I would personally want to do. Yeah,
totally. And, Luis and I, we solve these problems as they are handed to us, right? So there is data, so we use it. There's, a lot of information around. We use it. We are part of that ecosystem. But having experienced it when the worst thing was, what they just called net decking, right? Where people would just use it's weird. We used to have to call it a thing. Like, you were net decking.
I played back then in the 90s. And when people first started getting deck lists from the internet, which was a novel thing because the internet was also not even that new. Mm-hmm. Net decking was a huge thing. It's like, is net decking going to kill the game? Oh, you're a filthy net decker. All this, really just, now we would consider it even completely deranged. Though, to be honest, I did back then too, because I was like, I was 12 years old and I was like, but you have information. Why wouldn't you use this? Why is that a bad thing?
Totally. And again, that's how we approach the problem of solving formats and stuff. But if you get to just be the hand of God that just says this, you get this much information, Magic is a much more enjoyable experience. It's much more repeatable. It's slower to discover when there's less information. You don't want zero. Although that was pretty cool too, being there, when I was young and at the beginning of the game, where you could literally just go somewhere, play against somebody, and they would play a card you hadn't ever seen before and didn't know existed. That was pretty cool too.
I mean, the Mirage Pro Tour was a pre-release where the competitors sat down and were given sealed packs. Detracting from this little historical anecdote is that one of the pro teams had connections with people at Wizards and knew the cards ahead of time, and that's just completely, come on.
Wow.
But
that's bad.
But the idea of it sounds great.
Were you on it? Were you on the team, or?
This was like 7 years before I played in a pro tour. So yeah, no.
So no. Okay. Our next question comes from Zygmunt Ausfresser. Nice. Do either of you have?
I got a set of Juzams from him once.
Oh, nice.
Or Serendibs, or maybe both. I don't know. I traded a bunch of old school cards with him, and I played old school with him. He's a good dude.
That's awesome. Sigmund says, do either of you have any experiences or stories? Oh, this is good. This is where I get to be Stockton to Malone for you for in this case, a fairly nasty dunk. Experiences or stories drafting the unsets over the years. Do you enjoy the silly nature of these sets, or are they mostly a distraction from mainstream Magic? Is there an unset mechanic you would love to see in a premiere set one day? Thanks for keeping my drives to work engaging each week. You're welcome, Sigmund. Luis, dunk away, my friend.
I'm an unset hater. It's funny, like, you might think I wouldn't because I like jokes and I like silly things. I find the unsets to be this like unholy combination of like not fun to play with, not funny, and overall just like, why are we making this? I really do not like them. I think that they are not a good product, and I don't really. I know why they exist. They exist because Mark Rosewater loves them, and that's a fine reason. He's done so much for Magic. Let him have it, but I don't think they're good. Like I think they're in fact quite bad.
Yeah, for me, I always assume that they're for somebody else. I've played them. There's a couple of funny gags in there or whatever. The thing that I don't like is when they start to creep into like cubes and stuff like that. I know that some of them are playable.
Comet.
Like Comet's a good example. And then there was that, is it a burn spell that you can like kick and cycle and, you know, the one that has like all that stuff?
Blast from the Past.
Yeah. And, you know, those are fine. Like I get the joke, but they do, they take away from the realness for me of Magic. Not the, you know, not translating the stories or the cards, but just the pool in which we all exist. When you start to push it out to those, it's kind of like, is this a joke, or like, is this a card I need to take seriously, or does this match up well with the things that, you know, I know and that I expect from a Magic card? And usually the answer is no, for those. They're kind of fun, I guess. I don't know. They're really not aimed at Luis and I. I mean, they're just not. Like the way that him and I engage with the game, the things that him and I find fascinating about Magic drafting, professional level play, high level play, and stuff just don't really have anything to do with the unset. So no. Also,
I thought the first one was pretty funny,
hideous.
But I thought the jokes after, like the next ones, just weren't. And honestly, that's like the biggest thing that kills it for me is like it's not doing the thing that I would hope it would do, which is like be funny. It just kind of isn't. And I think I've played with them. I played with all the unsets in some form or fashion, whether it's a draft or whatever, opening some packs, doing pack wars. A lot of the cards just aren't that fun to play with either. And that's really tough for me to square. Why does this exist? You know?
Right. It's very much top down with the humor being the thing. And I think you know what it reminds me of, Luis, is when somebody has an idea that is funny in theory, but if you actually didn't, it wouldn't be, right? Like, it's like, oh, let's make a movie where this thing happens that's absurd, right? And you go, I get your joke. I see what you did. That's funny. But if you actually made the movie and sat people down, they wouldn't laugh. Like they would just say, okay, you made a joke, I guess. You know, it's funnier when it's in your head than when it's actually printed on a card. Next question comes from Jeremy, who says, hello, Marshall and LSV. I hope you guys are doing well. I have a little brain teaser that I was thinking about earlier today. Want to design an escape Titan. We have Croxa, Uro, and Flage. Here's mine, the blue-white one. Okay, all right, Jeremy. When it enters or attacks, exile another creature. If you control it, it re-enters tapped with a +1/+1 counter. If an opponent controls a creature, it re-enters tapped with a stun counter on it. That's kind of cool. And then he wants us to design ours. So he says, I need to design one for black-green and you for blue-red. Can you design on the spot? I certainly can't. I mean, obviously, I'd want it to be value-oriented. I'd probably want it to
And we're assuming, just for people who aren't maybe familiar with these cards, these all cost 1 XY. They're 6/6s. When they ETB, they do something and then they die unless you escape them. Then they have escape XXYY exile 5 cards. So
and when they attack, they do the thing too, yeah.
Then they attack, they do the thing as well.
He says, since you're the king of luck and skill, he wants you to do a blue-red one.
Blue-red one.
Yeah. I mean, I think for green-black, I'd want to do, like, I'd love to have something that was forcing them to sacrifice. Like, that seems really good. And then something land-related for the green side. I don't know if a straight-up edict is too good. Like, if it's just they have to sacrifice a creature when you do this, but...
If you made them sack a creature, you couldn't then put a land into play or something like that.
That's too powerful.
Like from your deck. You couldn't be +1 card. And you probably wouldn't want to do Uro from your hand. That's kind of a weird thing to do twice there. I think my inclination for red-blue would be probably... I mean, here's the thing. Flage is just straight up like, oh, they just put Lightning Helix on a card or whatever. Right. They weren't trying to be super different from Uro. In fact, it even gains 3 life, which I think is, again, they're a little bit similar. I could see doing the red-blue one at like deal 2 damage to any target, draw a card. You'd be casting kind of like a little bit like a fire ice sort of thing. And then you would get to
that's cool.
Flash it back, make a 6/6, deal 2, draw a card. I mean, that's similar to Uro. It like draws a card. It does damage, kind of like Flage. Like that's in the same ballpark in terms of power level, I think.
Could I do both players sacrifice a creature, or does like the stacking not work?
Because
like
you could stack it such that you just get to sack the Titan.
Okay. I just would do, it would be an edict and then a minor green effect. I don't know, a little bit of something.
I mean, depending on how close they want the loop, it could be like, you wouldn't want to do gain life, I don't think. I think that would be too much.
Because I like the idea of both sacrificing because it helps you fill your yard, but at a cost, right? Like if you have a random thing. And then Jeremy says, thank you so much for all you do. This show means so much, and I appreciate everything you put into it. Oh, thanks, Jeremy. It's been great hearing from Paul and Sirkovitz. And I'll just say on TBS. LSV, good luck on qualifying for the Cube tournament, and good luck at Worlds, ... if you can make it, although Jeremy didn't say that part. I know you've been trying to qualify for Worlds for a while. I want to see your face on a card, maybe even the Blue-Red Titan. Nice.
There we go.
And Jeremy says, Marshall, I hope all is well with you and that you're getting settled into your new place. Thank you. That's wow. Jeremy.
Yeah, Marshall's been place flitted recently. So.
I have. Nice. Next is Jordan from Jordan, who says, hey guys, I need to know what y'all's opinion on people who wait to do everything at their opponent's end step. Cracking and Evolving Wilds turn 1 on my end step isn't really denying me important information as much as it's slowing the game down. Where's the line between information denial and brisk play?
I would push back a little on the framing of like people like, it's not like this is an intrinsic characteristic of the person who, they don't always do this or whatever. Like I would say in general, I'm of the school of thought, or I just crack the thing on my turn because I think the F6 value is better, or the auto pass value in Arena. But that being said, like if someone wants to wait, I don't really think that's a bad thing. Like they get to make that choice if that's what they want to do. And
I don't have a problem with it either.
And I do think that like strategically, if you wanted to play tight, like when I played in the like Rivals League on Arena, right? This is like the Pro League. I wasn't cracking Evolving Wilds main phase either, like, or the equivalent. Like it is a minor edge, but it's not really like you gain any gameplay advantage by doing it faster. You just make the turn go faster. So when I'm playing an Arena draft, like on my phone or whatever, yes, of course I'm going to crack it. When I'm playing in a first serious tournament, I will wait a little bit. I will respect the what we're doing here. So I don't have a problem with it. And also some people like to practice the way they play, and that's a totally good attitude to have. So, I mean, I've had people Cheon's actually a great example of this. When I used to play Cheon like one-on-one Winston drafts in our apartment in college, he would play about as hard as he played when he played at the Pro Tour.
Yeah, he's got one mode.
He just gets dialed in. That's how he plays Magic. He doesn't really mess around. So I don't really fault people if that's the way they approach things.
No, and I do think Jordan, again, if the stakes or if it means a certain amount to the person, I mean, like in this format, if you said, Evolving Wilds go and I was deciding, I won't change my initial play necessarily, but I kind of want to know if you're going to go get an island or a plains. Like those are different things. Those can affect, how I play my lands or something. So I don't really have a problem with it. And
cracking it right away or doing something like that can send information to the enemy too. Let them know that you have enough lands that there's no, decision there. And like there's plenty of places where that could matter.
Yeah. Jordan has a follow-up question. Inquiring minds need to know about how much rate of return there is on shuffling the pack after picking during a paper draft. Is it worth it, or is it just something people do because they saw good Magic players do it?
You're required to do it at the Pro Tour, so I always just do it.
But when you're in person, I mean, I do it every time. Like it is not hard to figure out at least what rarity if they just left it literally in the same order. Or if they're just
looking at two cards next to each other, they take one and pass you the pack. Like,
right. That card at the back is going to be the one that they were. Yeah. So, and also this is interesting too, or this is easier too, because it takes like literally half a second. Like there's no.
Yeah. I like shuffling a pack. That's fun. I mean, when I often am just shuffling packs when I'm at home. So.
Yeah. Next question comes from our old friend Scalding Hot Soup, who says, hello.
Ian, what's up?
Yeah, it says, hello, Marshall and Luis. Always a pleasure. You too. How would you characterize characterize the current health of the paper Magic community? At least to me, it feels like it's more challenging to get paper events to fire now than it was even just a few years ago. Is the community smaller or just changing? Could players be shifting towards Magic Arena? Always great to hear your thoughts.
I totally believe Ian's analysis here of what he's experienced. I don't really have much of an insight to it. Here in Denver, it seems pretty healthy. My friends go to RCQs like every weekend, and frequently are playing in these things. And that's not so much for me, so I don't really go. But I haven't run into any situation where it's like showing me that there isn't a vibrant Magic community. But that could be different in different places. From a just straight up like what theoretically happens. Yeah, the better the online play gets, it does take away from paper play in some aspects, but it also could get more people into playing Magic. I think Arena probably means more people end up playing Magic as a whole. So I think that that could go either way. But it's kind of whatever is going on in your own community if you've seen it in your community, it's happening in your community. I don't know if you can extrapolate much outside of that.
Yeah, I wonder, do you think that the rise of Commander has an effect on it? Like, are those players that just weren't playing before, so it wouldn't affect like a draft? Or are there two of the drafters that are like, I'm at my buddy's house playing Commander this weekend or whatever?
I don't know. I mean,
hard to say, right?
Yeah. It also, like, Commander probably makes it easier to do that rather than play other forms of Magic. That I imagine would have something to do with it as well.
It's more forgiving in that way. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Ian. Next it comes from James, who says, first off, love the podcast. Yours is the only one I listen to where I never miss an episode. Thank you, James. Secondly, my question, of the various atypical limited styles you wish were on Arena, like Winston, Campfire, Sealed, or Draft, open 3 packs and then draft 3 more, etc. I guess the question is, which ones would we like to see on Arena? And then also James is requesting more Let's Stump Vargas sign-offs.
Oh, we haven't done that for a bit.
Yeah, we could probably bust one of those out for you in a little bit, James. What are are there any other styles that you'd love to be able to have just straight away on Arena? I know you've been doing Winston on your YouTube channel and stuff like that.
I've also been doing a Campfire. If you remember Tom Lapilli, he recommended I do that after testing it out some. And that is like one-on-one where we both draft and we each take a card and burn a card every time we pass a pack. So you're kind of drafting 2 decks at once, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So that one I've had a lot of fun with. Would
you like to see it on Arena? Like, I mean, like legit, would you? Obviously, you're not going to just say no. I
doubt I would play it on Arena. Like, okay. I don't really have much of an opinion as to any of these on Arena, I wouldn't say.
Next comes from Judah, who says, hi, Marshall and Luis. I started playing Magic in 2009 with the original Zendikar, and the art style from that time is my favorite. Do you have a favorite set or period of Magic art?
I really like the Mirage art. Like Mirage Memory Lapse is like one of my favorite pieces of art. I'm a sucker for old art. Like I like Richard Kane Ferguson's, like a lot of his like original stuff. I mean, his stuff now is great too, but like just Solkanar the Swamp King and stuff like that. Totally. It's just incredible.
Yeah. My favorite stuff is mostly as old as you can get. The thing that I appreciated about the old art and the lack of direction that it had, right? I mean, right now, things are quite lined up and you can definitely tell when
we all know the art's better. It's streamlined. It's more cohesive. They've got a style guide. I agree with you. I like it when it was like 100 different artists throwing things at a wall and you get a Drew Tucker piece next to a Richard Kane Ferguson piece. Totally. And they're not at all the same.
Right. The card I always think about is like Stasis, right? Like they just could never make that now,
Fade Jones, I think is the name. It's awesome.
Because that old way to me still left room for the truly great ones, to pop up. You mentioned Richard Kane Ferguson and the Mark Tadines, Anson Maddox back in the day, Rebecca Gay,
Chris Rush,
right? These, Treese Nielsen, John Avon, these names, they bubbled to the top naturally, but we still got weird stuff that were like one-offs or just stuff that was like totally different, than what we saw. But the true great artists, they still get to carve out their name as well. So I kind of had the best of both worlds there. Next, another friend of the show here, Shivan Bot says, what makes a card a cube card? And I mean more than just raw power. You hear folks all the time say
raw
that
power. Yeah, that's the answer.
Raw power, yeah. That such and such a card is a great card for cube without really explaining how or why they got to that conclusion. I'm curious how you guys spot cards that seem tailor-made for cube inclusion. Thanks, Shivan. Appreciate the question. And it's a good one too. Luis, I remember MH3 came out, you and BK went through and did kind of a cube-ish set review, and we're picking out cards that would go into the cube. But with Bloomburrow, not a whole lot really stood out to you. How do you decide what would be good besides just raw power?
Well, number one is raw power, to be clear. Mm-hmm. But if that was the case, I don't think new sets would add as much as they frequently are to cube, because on a straight raw power perspective, like the bottom 10% of the cube you can beat, but like it's hard. You're never beating Swords to Plowshares or Force of Will or Black Lotus on raw power, and that's fine. It's not, the cube doesn't need more of that kind of card, honestly. Mm-hmm. The main way I think new cards make it into cube is, what do they do that works with the themes already present in cube? So I'll give you a couple examples. First of all, like on raw power, Felia is just in cube, right? Felia is the 1-white 2/2 flash, like flickers a card when it attacks. That one just makes it on straight up raw power. That card is just really strong. Mm-hmm. But then you look at Vaultborn Tyrant, which I think is the best card to come out of OTJ for cube, and look at that one. It's not raw power because it's a 7-drop. Those don't get cast. There's a lot of good 7-drops that don't make it into cube. Mm-hmm. But what Vaultborn Tyrant does is it works really well with Flash. It works well with Sneak Attack. It works well with Reanimates. It works well with like kind of natural order, Green Sunsies, all of these things. The reason I think this card is so sweet is it just kind of does. It works with all the different cheetah monster into play cards, and you can also cast it. It's just a really sweet card.
Yeah, like perfect sweet spot. Yeah.
It plays out super well. Other cards like Malevolent Rumble they're partially on raw power, but also on synergy. It dumps cards in the graveyard, gives you a token for Skull Climper or Gaia's Cradle, and kind of does a lot of different really cool things. Or Shifting Woodlands. That's the land from the most recent set. That are not from Bloomburrow, from before that, where you have, it's Modern Horizons, that you has Delirium. You can pay 2 green, copy a permanent in your graveyard. It becomes that till in a turn. And like literally today, I Shifting Woodlands to Gristlebrand because I had a Reanimator deck that used actually Malevolent Rumble to put Gristlebrand in the graveyard and then copy it with Shifting Woodlands, attack for 7, draw a bunch of cards. So it's always a combination of synergy and power level. And like, I know Shivan was saying besides raw power, but there's not really besides raw power in the sense that like the cards have to be powerful in order to make it. Are they high enough on the dial of A, raw power, or B, synergy, or more realistically, somewhat both? This card works, like there's cards that work really well in the right deck. There's cards that work well in all decks, but are probably a little weaker overall. It's just, cube is awesome and draft is awesome. And putting together these things where like Manifold Key and Lava Spur Boots and Lightning Greaves are all good enough given the context of the cube, but you wouldn't call them any all-stars on raw power at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I always, the only other thing that really seems to come in is if you can feel that it combos well with other cards or does something really interesting or is novel. If it does something that other cards haven't done before, it's usually worth a shot because sometimes these things really do perform way better than you might think. There's cool combos that are hard to see at the beginning, Displacer Kitten or whatever, things like that, where you're right. Like, this does some stuff. But
like Legion Extruder is just such a cool card. It's 1 in a red artifact, ETB, deal 2 to any target, and then you can pay 2, tap it, and sack another artifact to make a 3/3 golem. Pretty unassuming. This card has performed really well in cube. It just offers a ton of extra value besides being a 2-mana shock, but you have to put cards in your deck that work with it. And if you do, the card is good enough, but like kind of barely, which is a cool place to do. Not, I wouldn't say barely. The card's been pretty good, but like it gets it over the line when obviously it doesn't on its face look like one of the better cards in the cube.
Right. And, even, another card, like Retrofitter Foundry. Like when we first saw it, we're like too slow or what is it really? It's just kind of a mana sink that does a bunch of weird slow stuff. And it's like, nope, that thing actually fits in really well. It took us
a while to figure it out, but Retrofitter is just really good. And you usually don't see it in decks that don't care about artifacts or have like Gaia's Cradle or Trident Academy, but that's where it fits. And I would say this gets picked probably around 5th pick on average, which is means it's a good card. That's really high for cube.
Totally. And if I brought it to you and just showed it to you, you would not say raw power level, it's going to make its way into cube no matter what. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Shivam. You can find Shivam, by the way. He's got the Casual Magic podcast pretty much everywhere. And you can check that out. Next question comes from Dylan, who says, hey guys, I find it unfortunate that all limited RCQs are, as far as I know, start with sealed. And if you top 8, then you get to draft. I know I'm not the only one who feels at the mercy of the packs and the lack of agency when confronted with a weak sealed pool. I'm just curious how you feel about that structure and if you understand why it's in place. Is it just logistics? Given the terms of engagement with these competitive tournaments, I wondered if you thought it may be worth dedicating more discussion to specific sealed formats beyond general sealed heuristics leading up to RCQs and arena opens. Thanks for all you guys do.
So I guess there's kind of two questions here. One is, was our kind of our opinion on sealed, and then the second is, should we devote more time to it? I think it's a common misconception that's how much luck is in sealed. I think it's actually really skill based, and not to like take away from anyone's experiences playing sealed, but I win a lot in sealed when I play it. Paul Rietzel is like famously really into sealed, and even among pros of comparable to Paul, which to be clear is a Hall of Famer, elite level player, he was still better at sealed than most other pros because he played it so much. Michael Jacobs, another example, he almost exclusively plays sealed when he can. Obviously, when tournaments are different, he'll play different ones. But that is all to say, sealed is really skill intensive, and if you are struggling in it, I mean, I would look at some resources, do more practice. The more you think it's like the sealed lottery, I think kind of the less good I think you probably are at the format. That's been my experience. It is a skill testing and rewarding format. Should we devote more time to it? Well, part of the problem is a lot of the skill in sealed is, how do I build this sealed deck? What am I trying to do here? And it doesn't change that much between formats. It definitely does change between formats, but I can't imagine wanting to do tons of content on sealed because it's hard to like. Talking about draft, I think, is a lot more applicable than talking about sealed in terms of the different ways you can increase your win percentage and learn. Because I think for sealed, it's also like each individual format, you're looking for slightly different things. And even if there's some like general heuristics you follow, I don't play enough sealed to also think that I would be able to kind of really get those small edges. So honestly, what you're looking for is Michael Jacob. He's the person I would look at.
Yeah, we try to touch on it when it's relevant, as you mentioned, Dylan, but the truth is that if we did entire episodes on sealed, it wouldn't be worth it for our listenership for the most part, because even if they do play sealed, it's usually for a one-off like an RCQ or an arena open at the most. And B, we would have to jam a heck of a lot of sealed, and that doesn't really make sense either, because then right on the next episode, we're just right back to doing the thing. So what we try to do is kind of mirror our own experience, which is that if you're good at the draft format, you can translate most of that to sealed. You just need to make some bigger picture adjustments that we always cover, those heuristics that you mentioned. And that is kind of the sweet spot. It follows what we believe a lot of our listeners do, which is similar, which is they mainly draft, but then when they are confronted with sealed, they want to know the shortcuts and the kind of, make sure to slow things down a little bit. There's a few cards that are better. There's a few card types that are better. And there's a few strategies that are worse, so that you should know. Yes, there usually is even more information to be garnered if you're willing to put in 20 or 30 sealeds and really start to get into the depth of it. But to do that for, one segment on one podcast doesn't really line up with how we do content creation, especially when, like Louise said, other people are doing that already.
The short answer is, if you want to win more in sealed, practice more sealed. Take a look at what MJ is doing. He usually gets to the heart of it. Like, he'll figure out, you should almost always play green in this format. You should try to be 5 colors. Discard spells are good. Oh, this is an 18 land format. And that's the stuff, honestly, you don't get unless you're really deep into the format. And we're not, I play sealed every format because I play all the arena opens, but I don't get to the point where I'm so dialed in that I could tell you these sorts of things. And practicing yourself is obviously just a huge part of any sort of learning. And
yes, by the way, Dylan, it is logistics. It allows them to take if you want to do drafts at the front part, it's very difficult because everything has to line up at the same time. You don't want uneven pods, ideally. And if you have sealed, you can just say, come all, and then just take the top 8, and then boom, you can do a draft. So that it has always been like that. Every PTQ I've ever played has been sealed, going back. So that's just how that works. Thanks for the question, Dylan. Next comes from Alexander, who says, question for Luis. I'm 41 years old and my wife is pregnant with our second child. It was not planned and I'm having a lot of anxiety about balancing the responsibility of another child at my age. As a father who is about to have twins, how are you preparing for the additions to your family? Do you have any advice or pro tips on how to balance fatherhood, your career, and relationship with your wife amidst the chaos? Thanks for the great content and life advice over the years.
What a question. First of all, congratulations. And I can imagine unplanned is probably a pretty different experience. So we were obviously planning for twins, but we did. I was going to say, are you going to decide
which of the twins was unplanned? Like,
yeah, right. I guess what can you do here?
Do you have any pro tips on how to balance life in the chaos? I mean, that's a doozy.
It's hard without knowing the specifics of your situation, because obviously, like, some of the things I do, you couldn't necessarily do. You have different things going on in your life, and likewise, some of the things you do wouldn't apply to me. But I don't know how old your first kid is, but my experience, at least, has been the older the kid gets, the more different cool things you can do with them. They just become, I don't know, they're little people. Like they have a lot more capacity and kind of interest in doing stuff like that, like going to the movies or playing. Like, I mean, one of the things I had a blast last weekend is me and my daughter, who's 8, we played D&D together. And by D&D, I mean, I ran an adventure for her, and we also ran around the basement, like fighting with foam swords. And that was how we did the fights. There wasn't actual dice rolling, but I would say it was in the spirit of D&D. I made her a character sheet. She found treasure, all that stuff. And that's something you can't do with a 2-year-old. You can have different kinds of play, but I found that the more you can merge the things you want to do with the things they want to do, the happier everyone is. Because you end up in a spot where, like, I don't know, you're getting to do awesome stuff and you're both enjoying it. And all of a sudden, that balance is very different than when you are taking care of a 6-month-old, where as much as you might enjoy parts of that experience, when you're changing diapers and you're feeding them and you're, trying to clean up messes like that is not as fun as playing D&D with your 8-year-old. I'm just going to say that. Like, that's been, it's hard for me to compare those two,
Yeah.
The other thing is, I would try to set aside time for you and your partner if you can. Like, the more you, like, not the more you can do it, but like, there's obviously a limit, but the first part will pass. Things will always get, calmer as time goes on. And B, try to just remember you're both adults. You get to take time for yourselves. You get to do things that you want to do. I kind of have a really nice setup here with my work, where a lot of my job is, like right now, talking about Magic or playing Magic. So if I go from working to then hanging out with the kids and all evening, I got to play my games. I don't feel like I got shorted on that,
Yeah. Yeah. You have a good career.
There's a reason I'm doing this stuff. It's because I love it, like Indeed. That's
Congrats, Alexander, on the little one, and good luck with that. By the way, apropos of what you just said, Luis, Ashley says, LSV, I know you do a lot of D&D. Do you also play BG3? If so, who's your favorite either companion or class?
I haven't played any BG3. I've watched a bunch of it because Gabby played a bunch with, like, my brother and a bunch of other friends. They'd have these, Matt Nass and stuff. They would play, and I would just kind of hang out with them on Discord, watch them play while I was, like, drafting. Mm-hmm. Awesome game. A tour of the force. It's really incredible. But I don't have a favorite thing because I haven't really played it myself.
Does that question apply to D&D? Like, are there companions and classes in D&D?
As to what I would play in D&D if I was playing D&D, I basically always played a spellcaster. The times I didn't play a spellcaster, I spent a lot of it wishing I had. So that you're not going to get me to put down the wizard's rod anytime soon, as it were.
There you go, Ashley, spellcaster. Next comes from David, who says, hey guys, Bloomburrow has been fun to draft for the most part outside of the color balance. What changes, if any, would you make to the format? Also, with the introduction of play boosters, has the limited format been impacted too much when it comes to power level? This set seems it hasn't, but some of our better limited players don't like all the extra rares that are in the pool. For LSV, how has it impacted the limited portion of the Pro Tour, and have many of the pros been upset with the changes?
No, I mean, I'm not going to say that Pro Tour competitors don't complain, because they complain about tons of stuff all the time. But something like that is, I don't know. There's not a lot of pros I really respect who would like complain about like what they opened in their sealed, like sealed is all luck, or play boosters make it too many rares. It's like, everyone's just kind of on the same footing there, and you got to draft accordingly. I honestly have not noticed a big difference in draft. In sealed, a little bit more. You notice a little more when someone opens a pack that has 17 rares in it or whatever, 8 rares, 10 rares. But honestly, I get why people don't like the play booster stuff. I'm not saying that that's not real. I haven't really noticed or cared that much about it.
Yeah, I don't really worry about that kind of stuff. Changes to Bloomburrow, I mean, I would make it slower. I just,
yes, I think the number one thing is not color balance, is making it slower.
Yeah.
Like it's really fast. I don't like how many games end before you get a chance to do too much, and Bloomburrow is not innocent in that regard.
Yeah, the thing that I think has felt better about Bloomburrow is that it feels like a fast format, meaning that many of the archetypes in the cards are on the board. Creatures getting bigger, +1/+1 counters, going wide, pump spells. So it feels natural for a format like that to be kind of fast, where the times when it really bugs me when a format's too fast is when there's all these really cool mechanics and decks and archetypes and things that they've put in there, but you feel like you can't explore any of the fun, slightly slower stuff because you're just getting slammed by creatures on the ground. Bloomburrow, the only deck that I was really like, I really hope I can make this a thing, was blue-green, was frogs. And you can, and it is. So totally. It's like they managed to cherry pick the one that I really wanted, and the rest are all kind of on the board type archetypes anyway. So it feels natural for Bloomburrow to be fast and doesn't make it feel as bad as, when you go back to the Sunset show on a few of the sets over the past year or two, you'll hear me complain that I really wanted to try the black-green deck in this format, and it's like laughably slow, right? Or there's these cool build-arounds, and you're just so incentivized to not use them. But still, I would still slow it down. I think that that's fully gotten away from them during this last stretch of time, and I'm looking forward when they kind of right the ship. Next question comes from Spencer, who says, greetings, resources most limited. While Bloomburrow is fun, I think a lot of us are focused on the Vintage Cube Live as our upcoming Super Bowl, as you two put it. During a recent attempt, I ended up in a funny position where I had a pretty solid strategy for one deck, but had the entire LED Brain Freeze Underworld Breach combo pass to me. I know these 3 cards are an automatic win combo on their own, but I hadn't built the deck around it by the time I got all the pieces in pack 3. So my question is, how willing should we be to just shove powerful combinations like this into a deck regardless of synergy? Is there a certain threshold of power where it's totally fine to have an off-topic win condition, even if it's otherwise unsupported by the rest of your draft? Thank you both, and especially LSV, for giving me videos to watch as homework for this epic event.
Well, I mean, it is context dependent, but I would say that you shouldn't just think that it's right to put in Breach, LED, Brain Freeze into any deck. Like, let's say you had a white-red aggro deck, maybe with some blue lands. Assume the fact that Brain Freeze costs blue is like immaterial, right? Like you have Tundra and you have Volcanic Island and you have 2 fetch lands or whatever. I wouldn't really want to, because if you draw LED and your average white-red draw does stone nothing, if you draw Underworld Breach, nothing, Brain Freeze, nothing. Part of the strength of a combo, I'm not talking about this one specifically, just combos in general, is that the pieces are good even by themselves. This combo actually does somewhat poorly on that front, because you end up in a spot where like most of these cards don't do anything. But there are definitely lots of decks where these cards can be good. Like you have Echo of Eons in your deck, and all of a sudden LEDs becomes a really good card. You have a bunch of other options, like ways to play a bunch of spells. Like maybe a Wheel of Fortune is really strong in this combo, and you can have a combo deck where these slot in really well. The other thing is combo decks have cards like Vampiric Tutor and Preordain and Brainstorm and Mystical Tutor that find you all these things. I would not put Breach, Brain Freeze, LED in a deck where it can't use the pieces and can't assemble the pieces. That just doesn't work. So you're okay to leave that in the board. And maybe you slide it in a really bad matchup because if you just draw those cards, you can just win the game. But
Right.
it's not, it doesn't fit it's just like Channel Emrakul is really good, right? But I wouldn't put Channel and Emrakul in a deck that didn't have any tutors or a way to find things.
Right. And,
or like a way to use those cards otherwise,
Right. Because it's interesting because, this is where the nuance comes in. But like, if you're going to put the combo that Spencer mentioned, okay, maybe you don't have literally tutors to go find pieces, but maybe you're blue based. Right. And so you're seeing a bunch of cards and maybe you're self-milling a little here and there. And, that kind of, you're surveilling or something, where you can dump a combo piece in the yard and make that a thing. Maybe you're looting a bunch where you can, do that. Like that might be enough to just get you over the hump. But, to not be fully built around the combo, but to go, I'm going to see enough cards here that I'm going to run it versus, a deck that where it's just completely out of left field and has no consistency with the rest of the deck. Next question comes from Tyler, who says, I just want to thank Marshall and the latest LR co-host for making the podcast. I guess that's you. I started listening in KTK and it's helped me make limited magic into a thing I truly love. Is there any chance we will get the LR versus LOL showdowns back in the future? I really miss those. It was one of my favorite things about a new format. Maybe a vintage cube version? Tyler asks. Those cowards would never battle us in vintage.
Yeah,
cube,
they wouldn't battle us in vintage.
Yeah, they're
cube,
smart. That's why.
I don't want to say never because there's no real reason. There's not. Julie, the dog is just going ham on the carpet for just no reason whatsoever.
Julie's doing Julie things.
I know it's her instinct. No, we didn't stop for any one glaring reason. It was mostly it was a lot of logistics, and I don't think we overall had the enthusiasm to continue. If I really wanted to do it or you really wanted to do it, I bet we would do it.
Yeah. We had that issue, that glitch thing, but that was kind really of, if that's all it takes to knock you off, then you weren't really,
Arena had a bug where you some accounts couldn't really direct challenge and it basically made it so one of them we couldn't really do it. So that's been fixed now. That's not the issue, but I just haven't wanted to do it. And I go on vibes on a lot of the decisions I make, and I don't know. The vibes weren't there for doing it. Absolutely nothing those guys did. I love all those guys. It wasn't that at all. It was just I only have so much time, and my evenings. To go back to the question about balancing your time, my evenings are like almost always spoken for at this point. Like there's part of the reason you haven't seen me stream as much in the evenings. I still try to make it every now and then. Is like that's the time I can spend with my family. That whether kids or not, and either way, like that. Things that go against that take up that time, I have to be very high priority for me to do it. And this wasn't quite getting to that bar.
Yeah, that's kind of how it felt for me. It was it's a lot of us to try to work around a schedule. That makes
and I'd have to talk to BK to get it going.
You have to talk to BK. Also, they were getting kind of close there.
Yeah, and if we retire now, they can never.
If we just step away, we're champions forever. Thanks, Tyler, for the question. Next question comes from Chris, who says, to both Marshall and LSV, what is your best comeback win that you can recall? Any format is fine. The stakes don't matter. And then Chris also has two pro tips for cooking courtesy of his wife that we'll hear. What about your comeback story?
So this is round 4 of a Vintage Cube feeder league. So this is, you have to 4-0 to get a token to play in one of these 64s. It was the last one of the weekend because they closed entries. So you could play out the deck you drafted, but you couldn't draft the new deck. It's game 3. I go turn 1, Island Tameo. Go 3. Attacks and makes a clue. They go Mishra's Workshop Coalition Relic. I'm like, okay.
Oof.
I go land number 2, attack, make a clue, go. They charge their relic, untap. Okay. They cast Channel. They cast Ulamog, and they kill one of my lands.
Oh.
And I float a mana, and then they play like one more spell because they had mana floating. And then I brain freeze myself for 12 in response.
Okay.
Like before the mana empties. My hand currently is Underworld Breach and another land.
Oh, okay.
If I hit Black Lotus or Lion's Eye Diamond, I had both in my deck. My deck was nuts.
Smokes.
I win on my turn 2, or turn 3, I guess it would be. I brick. I untap. I draw. I attack with Tameo. I crack a clue. Brick. Pass the turn. They attack me with Ulamog. I'm down to no permanents in play. They play like 2 more things. I untap and I draw Black Lotus.
Game? What the heck?
So I peel Black Lotus on my turn, go Lotus, crack it for red, Underworld Breach. Now I have Lotus, Brain Freeze, Breach. I do some loops to get up to Storm Count. I Brain Freeze them. They have Emrakul in their deck as well as Ulamog. So at this point, I'm like, oh my God, okay. So then I'm able to, because I have Black Lotus, Underworld Breach, Brain Freeze going, Brain Freeze myself to mill my whole deck, play Lotus, play Third Path Iconoclast, and get to make a bunch of 1/1s, play Urza. So now I have like a 12-12 construct, or it's like a 10-10 construct. Play Minsk and Boo going down to no cards in my graveyard, -2 at sack the construct and nug them because they channeled the Ulamog.
No way. That is and you had no cards in your library, right? So you couldn't.
No, I was dead. I was dead if anything else happened.
That is unbelievable. Well, I'm not going to try to fight that one. That is crazy. I did have an extraordinarily satisfying cube win. It didn't really have as much to do with the game itself. It was a very good, very, very close game. But I got the premature GG.
Oh, yes. You gotta win if that's the case.
And my opponent was playing aggro. And it was a particularly weird one because I even had a mana available. Like I had a land untapped. So like in Cube, that, there's a million things you can do, from that position. And they had just been playing the play something, attack with everything every single turn, really good curve with a Mox or whatever. But I had the right removal spell. And so I lived through that turn. I got to untap with all my mana. I did like 2 things, one of which killed their thing and one of which stabilized the board. And I was able to come back and win. And I think they typed in like maybe not or something at some point. And I was like, yeah, maybe not. 2 pro tips for cooking from Chris's wife. If you ever decide to embrace sous vide, and Chris says you should give it a try. I have one. Have you used a sous vide cooker?
I've never used one. I bought one to give to David Ochoa for his birthday once, but
they're pretty cool.
Actually used one.
They're pretty cool.
They seem neat.
Yeah. Number 1, shrimp, medium rare steak, and béarnaise all cooked at the same temperature. Steak still needs to be seared, of course. So that's one tip. That sounds good.
Okay.
Number 2, turkey confit is amazing and the best turkey dish you'll ever have. Prep takes some time, but a good sous vide bath setup in a cooler works wonders. The first time we tried it, it was 2020 for our first ever Thanksgiving dinner without extended family. It is now a staple. Thanks, Chris. You know how we work. We love cooking tips like that. Next question comes from Atypical, who says, "Hi, Marshall and Luis. Thanks for the good work. Have you come up with any specific strategies to tackle the era of the play booster?" We talked about this in a couple questions ago, but I mean, strategies? No, right?
Right. That's the kind of thing that I would not, it's not really, we're not speaking the same kind of language there. It's like, I don't know really what that means. I don't really think that's much avoid it. You're overstating the importance of the play boosters if you think you need a different draft strategy than before, because you just don't. I mean, you have to expect maybe more rares or whatever, but it's not, you don't need to go into the draft differently. Like doubling the number of rares wouldn't really, and it's not even close to doubling. It's just slightly more usually, like, well, not slightly. It's somewhere in between a decent amount of doubling, but there being more rares, I don't think fundamentally changes how draft works. I mean, look at Cube Draft, right?
Totally. Yeah, like I said, I think that there's some problems or some changes or problems that get posed to us as you just take them at face value and move forward rather than trying to view them as, some deep strategic thing. Shadowcat says, this one probably belongs in a different thread as it's pretty draft specific. No, you can, that works here too. Is there anything to be said for being open to drafting a subpar archetype once people are more aware of, and therefore more likely to be fighting over, the better archetypes in a format? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how draft works, like in the sense of like, one of the best ways to get value or alpha in draft is finding things people underrate or overrate and, acting accordingly.
I'm more Sigma, but you can be alpha
or beta.
Yeah. It's one of those. Yeah, no, totally. Generally speaking, if let's say that the best archetype or a good archetype supports 2 players, per draft. If 3 people are fighting over that archetype and you're the only one fighting over the second best archetype, you're going to be in a much better position than the players who are trying to fight each other, especially if they happen to be sitting right next to each other or very close to each other at the draft table. That's where things can, you're 4 picks in and there's nothing for you all of a sudden. Like, you don't ever want to be in that seat. You'd much rather be in the other seat. There is a question about how low, like, let's say you stack rank all the archetypes. Would you draft the 9th best or 8th best archetype if it's a 2-color pair set? And the answer is usually no. You're actually better off fighting it out with other people for the better archetype. But if you're anywhere in the middle or above, maybe even slightly below the middle is kind of my sense, then I think that, yeah, totally. If it's open and you're the one who's drafting it, you'd much rather have that than be fighting it out for a slightly better archetype. Great question, Shadowcat. Next is from Nathan, who says, "Hi, team. I love the show every week. Thanks for being so consistent. A question this time for Luis. I was a huge Storybook Brawl fan and have been loving Once Upon a Galaxy. How are you involved with the game? Can you give us any updates on plans for official release? Will there be any other opportunities to acquire the swag that was part of the Kickstarter that was canceled?" It says.
Yeah, Once Upon a Galaxy is a mobile game that I'm working on. I'm doing some design and some promotion of the game. It's by a lot of the same folks who made Storybook Brawl, like Matt Place is the lead, and he's a fantastic game designer. I've followed him around to a bunch of different places. He was my boss at Direwolf when he first hired me 2012, and this will be the 3rd time I've worked with him on different projects because I believe in his game design chops and his leadership.
Also a notable Magic player, right?
He's got a Pro Tour win. He actually won a Pro Tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he was one of the first generation of Magic pros and went from there to work at Wizards of the Coast and from there to work at a bunch of places, Blizzard, Direwolf, etc. As for the game, yeah, the game's awesome. I love playing it. We're going to have a Steam build here, not in the too distant future. You can go to galaxygame.gg to check it out. And I would say, like, we're still pretty early on in development. Like, we're in open beta now. You can go and play the game right now, but it is got a lot more coming. And because I'm talking to the audience, I do feel compelled to say that we are not going to have anything at all involving crypto in the game. We got burned so goddamn badly last time. Yeah. It's one of our big regrets with Storybook Brawl. So absolutely nothing like that. And yeah, take that for what it's worth, I guess.
Yeah, lesson learned there. Next question comes from, let's see, is this one from Todd? Yes, from Todd, who says, "I got turned on to the podcast The Grey NATO when Marshall was a guest." That's, by the way, a watch podcast that I went on a little while back. Really great guys that run that show. A thing they do sometimes that I think is surprisingly fun is an episode where the hosts take turns listing things that they've come across or purchased in the last year or so that they're having an outsized positive impact on their lives, like a sweet bag or a new hat or a YouTube channel or a book. Do you guys have anything that's making you happy lately to recommend? They do that on their show, Luis, but also one of the things that they talk about on their show is gear, like for hiking or traveling or stuff like that. Yeah. So it's like a little outside of our wheelhouse for that kind of thing. But yeah, is there anything, have you found, I mean, I found a kind of
Why don't you go first and I'll think about my answer.
Yeah. I'm always, I watch a good amount of YouTube and I really like it when I find YouTubers that I feel I try, we try to be like that on here, and I try to do that with my other stuff, which are kind of like the real deal, right? Like where you don't feel good like judgment. You're the what?
Who have exhibited good judgment.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because it's very easy to find content that is sort of that cookie cutter, like, hey guys, and, smash the like button and do the, and it's all calls to action and it's all, but you don't really feel like, I don't know, it doesn't really feel real. And then when you find somebody who does, it's like, it really stands out, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm actually getting what this person actually thinks or talking to them. And whenever I do, I really like it. People that can shoot straight and don't have, they're not just like always saying the same things, that type of stuff. And a few of them that have popped up for me lately, one of them is Scott Galloway. And he does a podcast called the Prof G Pod. He's also on a podcast called Pivot. with Kara Swisher, who's like a really well-known tech writer and tech journalist. She's kind of into other categories.
Not a
now
big
too.
Kara Swisher fan, to be honest.
You're not? Okay. Well, she's on there with him, and they kind of counterbalance each other, I guess. That's how I would see it. But I really, really like him. Passionate guy, very smart, entrepreneur, teaches at the Stern School of Business at NYU. He has it's called Prof G is like his things, but he's just somebody who, you know, that you're getting what he actually thinks. And that to me is automatically interesting. Whenever he gets asked a question, I'm always like, what is he going to say? Like, he doesn't fit neatly into any category that's just like, you know, some political category where like, I can answer all these questions for you. Like, you don't even need to tell me, like, I already know what you're going to say to all of these things. He's not like that. And I appreciate that, and you know, that he brings some honesty to the table too. So I've been kind of eating up his stuff. The podcast that he has that I like the most, is actually about like, it's called Prof G Markets. So he's talking about like, stock market and the economy and stuff, which, I don't know. It's more just like a good vessel to hear his thoughts on big picture stuff, I think. But yeah, so he's somebody that, you know, I really have enjoyed and would recommend. What about you? What have you been into?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't quite the same thing. And I guess it's a bit personal, but I actually recently started taking semaglutide, which is Ozempic is kind of the one name that you might be more, you hear more commonly, though. It's actually Zepbound, which is like the same thing. And I was, you know, pretty nervous and wasn't sure about it, but it has really been kind of crazy how it doesn't make me feel worse. In fact, I've been in a great mood over like the last month, but it makes me a lot less hungry. And the thing I've always personally struggled with is I'm always hungry. Like, you know me, you've spent a lot of time around me. I'm just always hungry. And even when I'm trying not to like eat too much, it's just been really challenging. It has been my entire life. And, you know, I've fluctuated in weight as I've done different things and gone up and gone down and what have you. But this is, I don't know, feels like a miracle drug. I certainly do not take medical advice from me, of all people, goddamn. But my personal experience with it has been exceedingly positive. And I don't know, you asked that when this question got asked, that's the first thing that sprung to mind. So
yeah, that's cool. That's good. Thanks for the question, Todd. We appreciate it. Next is from John, who says, "Hey, Marshall and Luis, I'm a big fan of theory and love your podcast. Episodes focused on magic heuristics. Can you think of any magic heuristic or advice you adopted which you found to be wrong? And do you remember how you discovered that it was wrong?" I can't think of any offhand. I mean, we've definitely adjusted our, like, what I would say is there may have been things that I adopted that I would rank lower than other things now that weren't the case. I don't know that any of them have just been like, you know, that's idiotic, or that is the opposite of what you should be doing, or something like that.
Yeah, I would say, like, obviously, I think people know that like bread, the whole like bombs removal evasion, you know, thing is kind of like
That's
nonsensical. Like people just kind of don't follow it anymore. But a lot of the big heuristics you'll hear over and over again are there because they've withstood the test of time. Use your mana every turn. Like, you know, when in doubt, take the cheaper card and draft. This one we've said a lot, and I still think actually holds up pretty true. I think people probably, I mean, this isn't a heuristic, but this is something I hear mentioned a lot. I think people probably worry too much still about what cards they're passing.
Yeah, that's draft. True, for sure.
And that's just not, like, I've said this so many times on the show. Most people would do better in draft if they did not think about the people they were passing to at all. Like, you just shouldn't let that be any sort of tiebreaker.
Totally. You're just better off if you're not. There's technically a little bit of value to be gained from using that as a tiebreaker or being aware of it, but it mostly will lead to, you know, what we call fancy play syndrome, or doing things where you're doing them because you think that they're helping you and they're really not. Next question comes from Alexander, who says, "I feel like I've hit my plateau in skill in MTG, and I'm frustrated by not seeing improvement despite the time I put in playing 5 drafts a week on Magic Online and watching content creators play. I want to take a step back. How can I improve or accept where I am while still loving MTG or any hobby like this?" This is interesting, Alex, because you're probably at diminishing returns here. The reason I say that is you said you play 5 drafts a week, and that might feel like a lot, but it's not. Like for people like Luis or people that have, reached the heights of the Pro Tour or even just become Pro Tour regulars, 5 drafts in a week would be like unacceptably low volume. That's not even a day for many people that are focusing on limited at that time.
Especially on Arena now, you can just blast.
Totally. So, a good example would be when we had Paul on the show last week or the week before. We said, Paul, we want you to come on and talk about Bloomburrow. And he's like, well, I can come on and I have some thoughts, but I'm not really like expert level in the format. I've only done 15 or 20 drafts. And that was 2 weeks ago. Right. Yeah. And it was like, no, it's all good for coming on the show purposes, but that's the mentality that people that are pushing through diminishing returns, say the 80, 85% range of you've studied, you've watched other people, you're doing a decent number of drafts a week to get to that level. But if you want to take it from 85 to 90, from 90 to 95 of your potential, you are now putting an inordinate amount of time to get a very small win percentage back territory. The things that people don't know about behind the scenes from the pro perspective is how much time they put in. I mean, Luis is a perfect example. Everybody's always telling me how talented he is at the game, and it all just comes naturally to him. And, how does he play so fast and all of these things? And Luis is special because those are actually true. But the thing that they don't know is how much grinding he did, what he sacrificed in his college years, actually sitting across from Paul Chion in many ways to get to where you got.
The answer is college.
There you go.
I barely got across the finish line. I graduated from college with a degree in poli-sci that I have not specifically put to use at all. Mm-hmm. But really what I did is I just played 60 hours of Magic a week instead of, putting a lot of effort into school, which I'm certainly not recommending other people do in any way, shape, or form. But that's what it takes. Every single person I know who I would consider an elite Magic player, and I love you, Marshall, but we're talking like guys like, again, Paul Rizzo, Paulo Vitor Damarusa, Paul Chion, like people who have competed in 15 plus Pro Tours, right?
Right.
They all spent years of their life where Magic was like one of their top, if not their top priority.
Absolutely.
And that's the same reason I generally don't advise people go into pro Magic as a career, even when that was like more of a viable thing.
Right.
It just, that's the dedication it takes you want to be the best of the best. You want to be, in the top 0.01%. You want to be in the top 200 Magic players or 300 Magic players in the world, or top 1,000, honestly. You put in the hours. That's what you have to do. And in this particular case, I'm not saying that the person who asked the question wants to be there, but think about it from just looking at yourself, not looking at anyone else. Marshall, for you to get, you're not at 100% of your Magic potential right now.
No,
you never will be. But
no, I won't,
because you do too many other cool things with your time. For you are probably, my guess is you're probably in the like 80-ish percentile of your Magic potential. Probably. You've played a ton of drafts. You've talked to a ton of great players. You've watched a ton of Magic being played. You put in the work. How many hours per week for you right now? Let's say you're at 80%. Would it take for you to get to 85%? Probably another 10 hours a week. How many would it take to get to 90%? Probably another 30 hours a week.
I was going to say I would start at 40 there.
Right. So like every percent above 80 is harder. Like it's not quite like exponential, but to get from 95 to 99, which is what it takes to be in the top 100 Magic players or top 200 Magic players, and to have, of course, a lot of base talent. Mm-hmm. Like it takes both. I know people who've put in the work who just won't get there because that's just not how their brain is wired. Right. That's just not, not everyone can do everything. Not everyone can play in the NBA. Like that'd be a ridiculous thing to say. Magic and chess and poker are just not different in that respect.
Totally.
All those people spent their 30, 40 hours a week, at least some portion of their lives. I haven't done that for a really long time. Once you build that up, it's kind of like riding a bike where like take Paulo Vitor Damarusa, for example. third best player of all time, in my opinion. He doesn't play that much Magic right now, didn't play the last couple of Pro Tours. If he decided he wanted to play at the next Pro Tour and be Paulo at the next Pro Tour, like be kind of up to snuff, he wouldn't need to spend that much time to do it. He would be able to do it without dumping tons and tons of time because he has this base level to kind of fall back on.
Yeah.
Should any individual person try to hit their highest potential? That's just a personal question. If you're not feeling like you're getting what you want out of it, then it's totally fine to spend less time on it. We just want you to know what it actually does take to get to the higher kind of echelons, even among yourself, not comparing you to anyone else, even to get to your 85th percentile, your 90th percentile possibility. And most people, I think, kind of correctly look at that and think, yeah, I'm pretty happy playing at 80th percentile. That takes quite a bit of dedication already. And you should be proud of it. Marshall, you should be proud of how good you are at Magic. You're very good at Magic. If you wanted to spend most of your life trying to get better, you would get better. You just don't need to do that.
Right. And that, that is, by the way, what happened to me is, when I was finally starting to travel to GPs to play, which was probably when I was at my peak, I was in, I would guess, mid 80s, of what we're talking about here for my own, personal level. And that level for me at the time got me to multiple bubbling the top 8, call it, like X4 finishes, right? Where you needed to be X2 and 1 or X3, something like that. So, I was, say, top 20, top 25 a couple of times there. And that's with like a little bit of luck too. Like that was not just, I don't think I could just consistently bang those out, but I did manage to do that a few times in a fairly short period of time. And at that time, I remember thinking like, how much better could I get at this? And I thought I have some runway. Like if I could, I think that I would have been one that if I could get with the testing team would have benefited from that a lot. But that was also exactly the time I started doing coverage. And so I had like a very clear fork in the road where I was like, well, do I want to go down this diminishing returns rabbit hole, or do I want to pursue this other really interesting thing that, as it turns out, came easily to me, and I had like more aptitude for it at the base as well. And so I said, this is, in my mind, I thought this is about as good as I'm going to get at Magic realistically. And that's exactly what happened. I'm now down to, like you said, 75, 80% or something like that.
I said 80. I didn't say 75.
Okay. Yeah. But just ballparking it or whatever. And I'm not going to get that much higher. So I think for Alexander here, it's time to have a realistic look in the mirror about what you actually want to do with this. Because if you do want to try to do pro, or if you want to try to be, you don't have to be Luis. Like Luis is what happens when everything aligns, when the hard work, the sacrifice, the dedication meets with like a generational talent at gaming, that then you get top 5 player of all time like Luis is, right? But, even if you look at, people that haven't reached those heights, but still reach the heights of being one of the better players in the world, maybe even won a GP or top 8 at a PT or something like that, you still have to get deep into the 90s on your own potential and have to have a decent toolbox to start with. Alexander, if you're looking at your life, and I don't know what your life looks like, but if you're doing other life things, that's probably not going to be in the cards. So for you, it probably would be best to say, I'd like to try to scoop up another 5%, and that's kind of where I'm going to end up. So I'm going to up my draft count and my study time a little bit more than where it's at, and then I'm going to have to be happy with that. And by the way, that'll let you crush Arena, beat basically anybody at the local level, or be an end boss at least for your local level. And it just won't hold up when you get to the regional or national or international level, and that's fine. I mean, dude, not that many
that's
of us
the great part.
Get
Magic's
to that
really
level.
fun. You get to choose how much you want to engage with it. You get to level that, or scale that up or down. Like now, especially that I'm like an adult, I see a lot of my friends who aren't, full-time pro Magic players, because that really isn't even a thing anymore anyway, who are like, like my buddy Adam was like, oh, I'm going to play the RC and DC, so I'm going to start practicing Standard, when he hadn't looked at Standard for a while, and he chose how much or how little to engage. Like, right now, with this whole Cube Worlds thing, I'm getting messages from folks who I haven't talked to in a bit who are like, oh, I want to come back and compete in this,
Right.
And that's the cool thing. Magic, at least for now, is always going to be there. You can kind of decide how seriously you want to take it or not. Really, what I would let guide you is how much you're having fun. Like I said, I make decisions on vibes. And if the vibes are good and you're enjoying putting in a couple extra hours of practice, awesome. If they're not, do something else or try to figure out what works the best for you.
Yeah. I always think back to your experience in the sacrifices that it wasn't just your college. Like, what was your life like during that time, right? You weren't like some social butterfly, right?
It wasn't as balanced as it is today. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. And that's something that, even Luis has said, he doesn't know if he would run that back again if given the choice, but it is what he ended up doing for that time frame. But that's what it takes.
I both would not ever re-roll my life because I think I've hit near the peak of like what I personally could have expected out of life. I'm really super happy right now. Really the happiest I've ever been. And also would not make the same decisions if I had to do it over again, because I don't think it was smart to just go all in on Magic when I didn't really have any idea of what that could be or what would be successful out of that. Like, I think I got really lucky to end up kind of with an outcome as good as I did, because I know a lot of people who've poured their heart and soul into Magic and not gotten, what they would consider a good return on that.
Totally. And, one other good example for this is, if you ever get a chance to be around a professional athlete, think we just had the Olympics, somebody who's dedicated their life to track and field, or somebody who's a tennis player, basketball player, something like that. The conversations that they have are different than they do with normal people, where they'll say like, oh, what was your favorite thing to do as a kid? And they'll be like, I just play tennis. Like they're doing 2-a-days. They're doing 2 workouts per day since they were 6 years old. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, what's your favorite food? Like, do you love ice cream? And they just go, I can't have ice cream. Like I'm on a, macro blah, blah, blah diet. And I don't do that. Well, what about family vacations? And it's like, yeah, we went on a couple, but like we play tennis at those too. It's like, a lot of people that get to those levels feel that their childhoods were compromised as a result, and maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. It depends on the situation, but that's a good thing to keep in mind, that you have to sacrifice to reach the top.
The Magic part of my career is one that I think has so much variance and could have worked out much, much worse, and I wouldn't run that. Like, I don't think it was smart to go all in on that, but to be the best at something, to throw yourself into something completely, you really can't think about it. Like you just don't really think about it that way. The people who end up being the best are the people who are obsessed with things and don't care about the costs associated with them. That's fine. That's, if that's the path you go down, that's the path you go down. Just it can be a risky one. I will say though, game design was not that risky of a path in retrospect. I think I could have been a successful game designer in plenty of different worlds, and there's not quite as much variance to that. But
right. But and this is a broader conversation, but you meeting the bar for being successful in game design is one thing, right? But like, look at like how you're regarded in Magic, right? It's not like you're like, oh yeah, you made some PTs and you won a GP and you had a good successful career. It's like, no, you're upper tier, the highest tier we have basically. A few more questions here and then we'll call it a show. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to get through all of them. We got pretty close.
I think that speaking of balance, the kids are once again summoning me in about,
I'll just do
a few minutes here.
I'll just do one more question here. Tim says, hi, Marshall and Luis. Like many others, I really appreciate your application of game theory to other aspects of your life. Heuristics is a great example. I'm wondering if you apply game theory to your financial decisions using EV or quadrant theory to help you make these decisions. And the answer to that, Tim, is absolutely, of course, 100%. In fact, that's how I make those decisions. I don't use quadrant theory. We just have a better
framework for it now.
Yeah, but EV is the framework. It is literally exactly how I frame financial decisions. You can use EV for non-financial, non-numbers things, but it gets a little muddy and sometimes it just leads you to make weird, dumb, misbalanced decisions.
Look, but don't use EV when deciding whether to hang out with your friends or go do go to 2 different social gatherings, which has higher EV. Well, that's just a ridiculous way to think about that. Do use EV when you're deciding whether to buy the warranty for the thing you just bought. The answer is no. You should never buy any of those.
Don't buy the warranty.
Insurance and warranties are all ways to hedge your bet, where you're paying a bad EV bet, like the EV of purchasing them is negative, to protect you from catastrophic loss in the event that something goes poorly. So to that note, I have medical insurance and I have homeowners insurance, but when I buy a laptop, I don't get insurance on it because they price it so that you lose money by doing that. But of course, you're accepting paying $100 to not get whammied for $1,000 the times it does happen. But they know that the rate at which people do that, it's profitable for them to offer it at that rate. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. So you can definitely use EV when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because people, that's a perfect example, and people will say, well, how do you know that? And it's like, because this company exists.
Yeah, I don't need to do the math. Like they did it for me.
Totally. And interestingly, when you do the math, which you can find articles and videos about this, because I like personal finance stuff. I think it branches out into your whole life. Like, I don't think it's just about money. So I like listen to stuff about it and kind of care about it as a like side passion of mine or whatever. And, that's a perfect example specifically for cars. They did a breakdown of where the money goes from the warranty that you get, and 20% of the money goes to the actual payouts, and 80% goes to everything else, including marketing, which is most of it, commission for the sale, that type of thing. I mean, if you're buying that, then you are, and you knew that, then you already know that you're just getting a really bad deal. And it's much better to just save up a reasonable fund to cover, breakages or repairs with your house or your car.
I will say the math changes if you're really clumsy. Maybe you should buy the phone protection plan if you just drop your phone every week or whatever.
Yeah.
But these are set for like kind of the average case. And
yeah,
I'm not encouraging you to not get car insurance. I'm saying you should get insurance for things where you could not cover the tail risk, the unexpected losses, like if your house gets flooded, for example. Right. But yeah, when it comes to, should you pay $40 a year to protect the $200 gadget that you bought? No, absolutely not.
Right. When you get something on Amazon or Best Buy, they always say, do you want the thing? And the short version is you should say no to that in almost all cases. The one exception is that a lot of this stuff is there are emotional components to it, and that's okay too. You don't have to be a total EV robot about everything, but just understand what you're doing. Like if you told me, I did get the extended warranty on my laptop, and the reason I did it is because I can afford it and it makes me feel good, I would say, it's your money. You can spend it however you want. You understand that you're not getting your dollar for dollar value back out of it, but you made that decision and you said that's okay. Then, you go forward and
I make plenty of negative EV plays. It just depends on the context,
Totally. And
I just like to be aware of them.
It's just nice to know that you're making that decision, right? All right. Well, we'll stop it there. Thanks everybody for those questions. We didn't get to all of them, but as you know, we will, when we do the next one, we openly encourage you to re-ask the question. Exactly. No problem at all. So once again, we want to say thanks to each and every one of our patrons. If you want to get access to the Q&A shows, the Patreon question of the week, that type of stuff, you can become a patron at patreon.com/limited resources. We also want to say thank you to Ultimate Guard for their support of the show. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV pretty much everywhere. And you can find everything related to the podcast over at lrcast.com. That's going to do it for this show. Thanks so much again for the questions, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Before we wrap up, I got to say that the upside and downside of having all this awesome limited to play is like, I've taken some pretty big beats, lately, like losing at 2-0 in that qualifier when I channeled for one too much on fourth Earlingus and they burned me out. Like, and it's
was it on accident or?
No, it was post combat because I attacked with Territorial Kavu, drew a card off it, and then found channel fourth Earlingus, and I had to do it this turn. And I had to kind of decide what life I wanted to go to, and I went down to 1-2 few, and they went played a giant Pyrogoyf and killed me, and that was a beating.
Brutal.
And it just reminds me that like there's always the two sides of the coin. You have to care a lot about something to make it worth doing, generally. But especially when it's something like where you're looking for competition, and that really drives me. But that also means the losses are really painful, and it can be tough to balance both of those things. So I guess I just wanted to say, as folks who are playing in the Cube thing or playing in the Arena Open, like if it stings when you lose, that means you care, and that's a good thing. I would much rather care than not care. Not caring is not the path to happiness, honestly. So good luck to everyone playing in those. I'll take some too.